That creature won't give up, Doctor, and we still don't possess an actual weapon.
You want weapons? We're in a library. Books! Best weapons in the world.
Using a child.
Hey!
How you doing, guys? Welcome back to Rewind Reviews. Now I know why you're probably asking why it is that I'm doing this movie right before October, and honestly it's my 40th episode and I just wanted to do something a little bit different. I was looking back on a lot of the videos that I've been doing over the past few weeks, plus a few of the ones that are going to be coming up in the future, and they're a lot more serious. Most of the movies are quite serious and a bit more grown up, so I just wanted to do something a bit more family friendly and just something a bit more fun to just sort of mix it up a little bit. So the movie that I'm going to be talking about in today's episode is Lilo and Stitch. Released in 2002, Disney's animated movie sees a young and parentless girl adopting a dog from a local pound, completely unaware that it's supposedly a dangerous scientific experiment that's taken refuge on Earth and is now hiding from its creator and those who see it as a menace. The movie was written and directed by Dean DeBlois and Chris Sanders and stars Davy Chase, Chris Sanders, Tia Carrera, David Ogden Stiers, Kevin McDonald, Ving Rhames, Kevin Michael Richardson, Jason Scott Lee and Zoe Caldwell. Oh, this is another one of those movies that when I see just how old it is, I feel so old, because this is one of those movies that I did go and see in the cinema. I think it came out like a few weeks before like Powerpuff Girls or something like that. I don't know why I remember things like that, but I just do. Yes, I did go and see that in the cinema too. But the thing is, compared to a lot of other big movies that were kind of coming out around the time that I do remember going and see, or did see when they came out on DVD, this was a film that I don't really remember a lot of the advertisements for. Like, I was aware it was coming out and I don't really know how it was. The marketing for this movie was very strange, because it almost kind of comes across as like a Deadpool sort of Minions style thing, where it doesn't really have any sort of connection to what the story is actually going to be, or really sort of give you an idea of who Stitch is. Because like the very early trailers, like the first like proper announcements for this movie, had Stitch like appearing in loads of different Disney animated movies that were out like a few years earlier, like Aladdin, where he ends up like picking up Jasmine when they're going off on the magic carpet ride, or he's mucking about with the chandelier in Beauty and the Beast. And it's just a really strange marketing decision that they did go for, considering how the movie actually is. And even though it would have been quite fun and quite interesting to have seen a character that does sort of go in and out of all these different animated Disney movies, what we got was actually pretty good. Unlike a lot of other animated Disney movies, the story that they are trying to tell in this movie, it definitely sort of captures your imagination. It does connect with you in a way when you are young, but the older that you get, you start to understand so much more about it, to the point where you have like this really deep understanding of the characters, the motivations, the backstory, everything, and it feels similar but still quite different to how you might necessarily remember it. It's a really odd experience, because this is a movie that I haven't actually seen in a long time. Like, it was a good number of years since I've actually last previously watched this one. With like getting to like revisit it with just my mindset of today, plus the internet, which Lilo and Stitch has kind of become like a bit of a meme template, with like images and panels and all sorts being like spread all over like Tumblr and Reddit and Facebook and Twitter and all sorts. This movie really has developed quite a big following over the years, and it has developed a lot more understanding, and I feel like a lot of people who did grow up with this movie understand it so much more with the passage of time. And that's probably one of the biggest strengths that this movie does have, because this is a movie that when you are a kid, when you are young, you're more than likely going to be attracted to this movie based on just what Stitch and Lilo are getting up to and their antics. But then as you're getting older, it does appeal to that more grown-up side of you. It does have an engaging story with great characters that does keep you invested. And that's something that all kids' movies should strive to do. You can't just be, you know, obviously you can have those movies that are just kind of geared towards younger viewers, and that's fair enough. But at the same time, these are movies that are going to be shown over and over and over and over and over again, because kids do have that sort of attention span where they just want to see something again and again and again. So having something that does appeal to adults as well really does help in a lot of ways. Like when I was younger, The Lion King was a really big movie. It's one of my absolute favourites of all time, and that was a movie that I used to just watch again and again and again. I knew every line, knew every song, everything about it, and my mum didn't mind it, but Dad, not so much when you've heard it 1,000 times. And I definitely didn't really understand that experience until 2013 came along and Frozen came out, and that song was everywhere and you just couldn't get away from it. I suddenly understood what all the parents were feeling, and I felt so old when it happened. I didn't mind it when it first came out. I do like the Demi Lovato version, but I do think that just hearing it maybe one too many times is not the best idea. But back to this movie. So starting off with the casting for this film, this is one of those movies where, like pretty much most other Disney animated films, the voice talent is absolutely perfect. Every single character is exactly right, and I think that who they chose for each role was perfect. Davy Chase was actually a kid when she recorded her voice for Lilo, and that really does help quite a lot. They didn't get like somebody who's a lot older to try and sort of do this. They actually did get somebody who was around Lilo's age, because it does add to the authenticity of the character. The youth and innocence that Lilo does have, as well as the impulses that she does have, they are really reflected very well, and I think that the way that they handle her voice is brilliant. And that goes for a lot of the kids who are actually in this movie, because they really do feel like kids, they act like kids, they are voiced by kids, and it works so well. It makes it feel so much more real. And then when it comes to Stitch, the thing that makes me laugh more than anything else is that the guy who voices Stitch is the writer and director. Chris Sanders is a triple threat on this movie. I think that the way that he co-directs and co-writes this movie is great, plus what he's able to bring to Stitch is brilliant. And it's one of the reasons why I do sort of bring up the comparisons to the Minions, because he is a character that doesn't really sort of speak English. It is a foreign alien language that he has, but he does sort of pick up little words here and there, and he can sort of develop little phrases and things that he does say along the way. I think my favourite line is just such a random moment, and it never fails to make me laugh, and it's just when Stitch bursts through this window and then just goes "Aloha!" Both Lilo and Stitch are really good protagonists. They are not something that you would necessarily see in the lead movie, especially in a big Disney movie like this. And I feel like what they are able to do, their connection, their friendship that develops over the course of the movie, and what they're able to bring out of each other is brilliant. You've got Lilo, who's been orphaned and she's been looked after by her sister. She's a bit of a handful, she doesn't really like being told what to do, she's quite angry and shouty and all sorts, and again, she does feel like a kid. She definitely throws tantrums like kids do. And then you have Stitch, who is a genetically engineered creature that is programmed to destroy everything. Stitch is able to bring out a lot more of a happier side to Lilo, and he's able to become her friend. She is able to develop more friends because she is very isolated. She is kind of, you know, she does try as much as she can, but the friends just kind of see her as like this really weird kid, so they try and keep away from her, which is a bit hard to watch. But what they're able to do, bringing Stitch in, and how their friendship does evolve over the course of the movie, is really good. And then when it comes to Stitch, because his destructive tendencies are kind of there, and he just has to destroy absolutely everything. There is a moment where they do sort of explain that he is going to be drawn to like big cities, and that's going to be where his destructive goals kind of take off. But they're on this little tiny island with no cities or anything around it, and he's just getting so stressed out about it. And I love how that happens, because it sort of gives him like this moment where he has to kind of like change his entire goal and perspective, and it becomes more about protecting the family. Don't get me wrong though, he is completely out for himself, because the only reason that he even sort of allows himself to even be part of it in the first place is purely to protect himself. He's using them as shields. Because you've got these other two aliens called Jumba and Pleakley, who are basically sent by this council to go and find him and bring him back to be basically destroyed. And it kind of becomes a game of like calling his bluff, because the longer he's interacting with the family, the more annoyed he's getting, because he can't really do what he wants to do, and they're just waiting for him. They know where he is, they're spying on him throughout the entire time, and it does lead to some really funny moments. But on the flip side of that, it also does show that Stitch can unintentionally be quite destructive as well, because his impact on the family, yes, can have its positive moments, but it also has a lot of negatives as well, and it can lead to some pretty nasty consequences later on. It is handled very well, it is paced very well. I do like how it is evolved over time. The only issue that I really have when it comes to those characters is the development for Stitch, because there is a moment where you kind of see like him and Lilo sort of bonding, and it's kind of like this really big Elvis montage. There's a lot of Elvis in this movie, and even though it's a really fun sequence and it does sort of seem more in line with what the marketing was, it is quite fast and it is a little bit hectic when it does happen. But the movie doesn't just focus on Lilo and Stitch, it also brings in Lilo's sister Nani, who quite frankly is one of the most gorgeous Disney animated characters that they've ever made. But That's not why she's in this movie. She is an absolutely fantastic character. Her story and her connection to Lilo is what grounds this movie, and it's what makes this movie appealing to adults, because this does feel very realistic and it is handled so sensitively and so beautiful, and it is absolutely brilliant how it's done. She's forced into the role of being Lilo's parent, where she's basically looking after her, and they've got social workers on them who are trying to basically like trying to look out for Lilo, and those struggles that are developed that you do see her trying to deal with are very realistic, and I think that they are handled very well. When I was younger, I didn't really kind of pick up on what was going on with their family, because you just sort of go with it, you don't really sort of pay attention to that. But when you get older and you start sort of picking up little bits of information, like the picture that Lilo's got, plus a few of the lines here and there from Nani, you do get a picture of what happened and why it is that she is the one looking after Lilo. And it is upsetting, it is a little tough to sort of get on board with, because it does ground this, it does make it very believable. And when it comes to the social worker side of things, we have Bubbles, played by Ving Rhames. Again, absolutely brilliant voice casting for this movie. When I was rewatching this movie, I sort of thought, he kind of seems a bit like Ving Rhames, and I'm listening to his voice, he sounds like Ving Rhames too. Let's have a look on Google. And then I checked and I was, oh my god, it's him. Bubbles shows up, and you get the idea that he's going to be like his big problem, he's going to be like his really nasty antagonist. But it is a very subversive part of the story, because all he actually wants to do is just look out for Lilo. His first priority is making sure that she is looked after, and it is really good. But this for me is probably the most complicated part that I sort of feel towards this movie, because the two parts of this story should not mix together. They are very different. We have the story with the social workers and Lilo and Nani and all their backstory, but then you have this mad over-the-top sci-fi flick with Stitch being on the run, and these two stories should not mix together, they should not work, and somehow it does. It does feel a bit chaotic, it can feel a little bit at odds with each other, but it does work, and I think the reason for that is because of how character focused that this film is. You know, we have the plot to sort of set everything in motion. Yes, there is a story that does carry everything through, but the movie is more focused on the characters, their dynamics, their relationships, and how that evolves over time, and that to me is why I think this movie does work. I'm always kind of surprised how short a lot of Disney movies are, because you sort of expect them to be a bit longer than they actually are. This movie is, from like beginning to end, is about an hour and a half, thereabouts. Might be a little bit shorter with credits, but it doesn't really feel that short. There is enough in here that you do feel like it is a very satisfying story. But again, there are definitely moments that I think that they could have either expanded on just a little bit more, or maybe shortened down just a tiny bit, because the introductions to both characters and both stories is very good. It is paced out very well, but they do take up quite a lot of time individually, because it's completely focused on Stitch and then it stops, and then it's completely focused on Lilo and then stops, and then brings in Stitch, and everything sort of gets mixed together. So I do think that maybe the movie could have been a little bit longer in some instances, like the Elvis montage sequence. I think that those sequences could have been a bit longer, and you sort of see their relationship expanding it just a little bit more. That's really the only sort of complaint I really have when it comes to the story. Everything else, it does work, it has an emotional payoff, it is a bit of a gut punch, it really does work. And even though I will admit that nostalgia is definitely a part of this when it comes to me, because of how many times I did see this when I was younger, that didn't really sort of faze me too much. But when the emotional story actually sort of kicks in, because I'm understanding it so much more now that I'm older, and I'm understanding every single bit about it, even all the little bits of context and backstory and everything, it does hit a lot more, and it is a lot more emotional. Hey, you want me to cry? Just put on one of the Toy Story movies, I'm gone. When it comes to the animation style that Disney have gone for with this movie, I believe this movie wasn't really given as much of a budget compared to a lot of their other bigger movies that were coming out. I think they just sort of needed something short and quick to kind of come out within the year that it did. Honestly, I think that's why it's so unique compared to a lot of the others, because it does look very different. The characters in this movie are completely different from things like Treasure Planet or Aladdin or most of these other big Disney movies that were out around the time. Everyone's kind of like rounder, there's a bit more of a cartoony side to it. There's a simplicity that does work very well, and part of that does come through in the backgrounds, which up until recently I never really realised was actually watercolour paintings. and it looks beautiful. It's all blurred together very nicely. I think that, especially because there's a lot of water scenes, water effects that are going on in this movie, it looks very nice. It's very realistic. Why do I keep saying realistic in this 2D animated movie? It's believable, let's just stick with that. Because of how simple a lot of the character designs are, it allows them to kind of move in a different way. They're very fluid, there's a lot more motion in a lot of these characters, they're able to sort of interact with things a lot more easily. They definitely use reference footage from like dancers and surfers and all sorts, because those scenes, they do move very realistically. There is a very believable look to them with the way that, even just like the weight of these characters as well, because like the scenes where like Nanny or David are like trying to pick up Stitch, and he's just really heavy, and it's like that drag that they have with it, and it just sells it so much better. And a big part of why it's so unique is because of where it takes place. This is set within Hawaii, and I think visually it looks very different from what we normally would see in a Disney movie. It's very bright, it's very colourful, there's a really great sense of culture there, and unlike a lot of other movies that I have seen where they do sort of show a lot of the culture of whatever sort of movie or wherever the characters sort of take place, that this one actually does feed into the story. It does help kind of sell it a little bit more, like the backstory and kind of like the meanings behind things all kind of ties into the story a lot better. Like those wreath things, I never really understood what they were, but there's a scene where like Stitch is going berserk and Lilo like puts one around his neck and then he just sort of like stops and then just slumps to the floor. And apparently they're supposed to be like a symbol of peace, and there's like a connection to love and all sorts. And again, it's not something that you really sort of pick up on when you're younger, and you do sort of need to look into it a little bit more. But honestly, there's so much going on, and it does feed into this. The culture of this movie, of the location, really does feed into the story of this movie, and it works really well. And then when it comes to the design of Stitch himself, I think he's definitely one of the more iconic Disney characters. Like if you just had a silhouette of him, you'd know exactly who he was and what movie he was from. When it comes to a lot of the other aliens who do appear in this movie, I don't think that they could really sort of stand out against a lot of other like extraterrestrials that we have seen in various movies, including Disney's ones. They do have quite unique personalities. I do like how they all sort of operate and interact with each other, and they do help provide some of the funnier scenes as well. When it comes to the music for this movie, the music is composed by Alan Silvestri, and he is one of those composers that has done so many iconic themes over the years, and I'm honestly quite surprised when I saw that his name was in the credits for this film. The soundtrack for this movie is very recognisable. It does borrow elements of Hawaiian culture with a lot of the instruments that they use and a lot of the themes that they may have, but it is able to kind of blur the line between all the mad like, sci-fi action stuff as well as some of the more subtler themes as well. It is a very nice soundtrack, and I feel like it is very recognisable. It's also one of those very rare Disney movies that isn't actually a musical. There are musical elements too. As I said, there are sequences that are sort of cut together in like montages of songs. All those songs, or most of them, are from Elvis. I do understand that there have been criticisms of the music in this movie where some people have said that they wanted it to be a bit more authentically Hawaiian, and I do understand that, but at the same time, if you can have an Elvis soundtrack, why not? It does help it stand out. I do like the songs that they do choose because it does kind of mirror a few little elements of the movie here and there, and I feel like it does sort of offer a bit of synergy where whenever you sort of hear one of the songs that does appear in the movie, you do automatically think of Lilo and Stitch, or if you see a picture of the movie you are reminded of Elvis's music. So it does work very well, and you do kind of associate it with both. At the risk of dating this review, I am curious what sort of music it is that they're going to go for when it comes to the live action remake, which supposedly is in development. I don't know if I'm going to be going to go and see it. I haven't watched quite a few of the new remakes. Honestly, I think the last one I saw was Aladdin. I haven't gone near The Lion King, I haven't gone near Mulan. That just reminded me, there's actually a little bit of trivia for you. There's actually a few little references to Mulan in this movie. I think Nani actually has like a poster of the movie behind her when she's in her bedroom. I think like one of the restaurants that they go past is called Mulan something, and it's just really fun little Easter eggs for you. Disney is quite well known for doing that. I mean, even like the live action Pinocchio has like this full montage of like every single Disney character sort of showing up in clocks. But back to what I was talking about, yeah, the music really is great. I do like how it is integrated into this movie, and it really does suit this film. There are some really great sequences in this movie, and I can't really do this review without mentioning one specific scene, and it's something that I think a lot of reviewers have kind of mentioned over the time, and more recently especially because with the release on Disney Plus, it's now become available to watch, and that sequence is a reshot version of the ending. The final sequence involves a spaceship chase through mountains, and it's a brilliant sequence. It's really great, it's really funny, and I think it really does kind of cement everything that happens in this movie. It really sort of builds up to this really well. But what happened was, this movie was being created in 2001, and originally what the ending was going to feature was a jet plane being hijacked by Stitch, and it was going to involve the plane going through buildings and streets and all sorts. And if you know your history, 2001 September probably wasn't the wisest decision for them to have done that. So I do understand why it is that they did reshoot that ending, and honestly, I do prefer what it is that they did go for ultimately, but it was a good sequence initially anyway, so it is worth a watch. If you haven't seen that version of that sequence, it is available on Disney Plus. Give it a go. What I can't understand though is that Disney Plus, since they've re-released this movie, they kind of re-released it, they've swapped one of the objects in this film, because like there's a scene where Lilo runs away from Nani and she hides inside, I think it's like a dishwasher or a clothes washer or something, and that's the version that I remember seeing. I think that's the version that I've actually got on DVD. Yes, I still have the DVD. But for some reason the Disney Plus version has decided to swap it for pizza boxes, and I don't really get it. I understand that maybe they don't want kids copying it, but at the same time it's just a really odd decision. Disney Plus has a habit of kind of doing this now, because I think like even Splash was edited for some weird reason with weird animated hair. I may have to properly bring that up when I get around to reviewing that film. But overall, when it comes to this movie, I still think that this is a really great film. It's very different from what we'd normally get with a lot of Disney animated movies. A lot of them since have kind of tried to emanate it in a way. I don't think all of them have worked in the same way, but this one does really stand out. It is very unique. Some of the story choices can be a little bit mixed, and it can be a little bit of a balancing act between the two stories that are going on together. But it's the characters that brings it all together. All these characters are brilliant and well realised. I really love the theme that they go for with the family dynamic in this. It really grounds this movie. It helps sell those more dramatic moments a lot more, and a lot of those more simpler moments, like where Nani and Lilo are just sort of sitting together on the hammock, where they're sort of like talking a little bit about their history and just the way that they're interacting. It is really good. I love how the drama side of it does land, and it does hit you. And the comedy is good. There are a couple moments where I don't think the comedy does completely land all the time, but most of it is very funny, and I do think that it is something that everybody can enjoy. It also helps a lot that this is one of those very rare movies where, even though it is a movie that did come out in the 2000s, that it does focus a lot on the comedic side of things. It doesn't have a lot of pop culture references, and it's so much better. It doesn't date this movie at all. You can still watch it today and get the exact same experience. This honestly is a great movie, from the design, the animation, the music, the voiceover talent. Everything about this movie does work very well. It's just a few little minor things that I've just got a few issues with here and there, but that's really it. This is a movie that I would highly recommend for anyone who hasn't seen it in a long time, anyone who hasn't seen it at all, somebody with families. If you have got a family, if you do have young kids, put this on, sit down with them and enjoy it. It really is worth a watch. And if you haven't watched it in a long time, stick it back on. So with all that being said, I'm giving this movie an 8 out of 10. So that's pretty much everything I've got to say for today's episode, so thank you so much for watching. As always, please like and subscribe, hit the notification button to keep up to date on everything that's going on this channel. If you have seen this movie, let me know down in the comments what you thought of it. Where would you rank it in Disney's animated movies? Also, if you have any suggestions for any rewinds you want me to do, whether it's film, TV, games, let me know down in the comments and I'll try and get around to them soon. Also got to quickly mention that at the time that I'm recording this video, I've literally just hit 50 subscribers, and honestly, thank you so much everyone who actually has. I really haven't expected it to even go past 10, but I really am appreciating every bit of support that I've been getting, so thank you so much. It's also coming up to Halloween season, so I'm going to be getting around to doing a few little horror movies here and there, just trying to sort of get us in the Halloween spirit, so keep an eye out for those. Thank you once again for watching, and I'll see you next time on Rewind Reviews. See you guys.